All right. So on this special edition of Empowering Her, I have special guest Jessica Williams. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm so excited. It's going to be great.
S- so let's talk about unexpected things. Um,
Yeah.
let, let's talk about the role that you're in currently,
Mhm.
and kind of that kind of your journey that you took to get kind of start at high school and kind of your path where you're at now.
Yeah. So right now I'm the VP of people, which most companies call it like VP of HR, human resources, but same thing. My path, uh, it's ironic because I'm not at my house right now, but normally in my house, I have like a whole wall of degrees behind me. So
Okay.
definitely went to college, but high school thought that I wanted to go to medical school. So I went to an undergrad, did like pre-med. My major was psychology, thought I was going to do that. Went on to get my master's degree in public health. Again, I was on the road to go to medical school. Finished my master's and decided I'm done with school. I'm not doing this for 4 more years. What am I going to do? And
Mhm.
I knew somebody that worked in HR, and she said, "Hey, maybe you could do this for 6 months, see if you like it." And honestly, by then I thought I'd want to go back to medical school. So I thought I just needed like 6 months off and then I want to do that. And that never happened. So that was 10 years ago. So I started out as a recruiter. So a recruiter
Okay.
for an oil and gas company on a 6 month contract. After the 6 months was up, they hired me on full time. Then I moved into like an HR generalist role, and have like just moved my way from there. And that was 10 years ago. So yeah, I originally thought I wanted to be a doctor. I thought at the time, and there's nothing wrong with going into medicine, but that was the only path that I knew could get you a lot of money. And so I was like, I'm gonna make money. And so yeah.
I like it, and it's we're kind of chatting about this before, but a lot of students, that's how they feel.
Mhm.
They
Oh yeah.
see the mainstream careers. Career day rolls out and a university comes in and they're like, yeah, hey, you can do medicine, engineering, architecture, and
Mhm.
so your basic ones. And so they don't find all of these wonderful careers like
Yeah.
recruiting and HR, and which, by the way, I think that is one of the coolest titles,
Yeah.
director of people.
Yeah.
So let's break down kind of your day to day, like my students would
Yeah.
understand. Let's talk about like some of your activities.
Well, when most people think of like HR, they think of the people that hire and fire people. So
Right.
literally even my parents, I think that's what they think I do all day is fire people. And that's not true. I do fire people though. So a big part of it is recruiting. So finding people, we have open roles. So I need to find people to fill those roles first. Second of all, I need to get them onboarded. So, what is the onboarding experience? Making sure that they like their job, that they like their manager. That's a big part of it. We want people to be happy. And I think that's probably like a new thing. Back in the day, they didn't really care if you were happy. They
Right.
just come here, do your job, leave. Now we want you to be happy. So, what does that mean? Like employee development? Are you learning? Do you like your manager? Do you like your peers? I'm the person that you would talk to about that, or I would do like meetings to where it's like, okay, let's get on the same page.
Gotcha.
And then I'd say 1% of my job is firing people. And I mean, it is what it is. If it's not working, if we've tried to fix it and it's not working, I would be the person that you would talk to. Um, so I'm normally the first person people meet, and then if they leave, I'm the last person that they talk to when they leave. So a wide spectrum, but most of my time right now is spent on like employee relations. So making sure that people know what they're doing. Where I work at right now, we're fully remote, so we don't even have an office. I work in my living room. I live in Texas, Dallas, Texas. Right now, I'm in Washington because I just want to be. So I'm here visiting somebody. I'll be here for a whole month. But being a remote company comes with its own complications. So a lot of my time is spent on making sure people feel like they're a part of the culture and that they can speak to somebody, and normally that person's me. So a lot of time talking to people. Like literally, like most of my day is talking to people and making sure. That's why my degree in psychology has come in very, very handy.
It's interesting you say that because I've talked to a number of people that have a psychology degree, and
Mhm.
they're all in like different fields, and
Yes.
some of them even said like, "Hey, go get a psychology degree because it'll
Yes. You
help
do
you connect
anything.
with people."
Yeah. I tell people that all the time. I have a niece and I tell her that all the time. Like, just go get a degree that you want and then you can get the job. Like, you really just need the degree. It doesn't have, I mean, depending on what the role is, like, I know people that have an art degree that are in HR, they have a theater degree, their psychology degree. You can do whatever you want and still get into HR. So,
I love it. So let's talk HR kind of in general for a second.
Mhm,
What areas of HR are there available for people if they go, I kind of like that idea, but
mhm.
I know it's a large spectrum, but
Oh,
what
yeah.
areas of HR, might people focus on?
So most people start in recruiting. So that's kind of like the entryway into getting into HR is to be a recruiter, whether that's like a junior recruiter, a temp, an intern. You start out recruiting, you learn the roles, and then most people go to an HR generalist. So a generalist means you're doing a little bit of everything. So if it's payroll, if it's benefits, employee relations, you get your hands in everything. And I always think that's the perfect springboard. So from an HR generalist, you can decide, do you want to be a specialist? So do you want to specialize in payroll or benefits, or do you want to continue to be a generalist and move your way up? So my stance was just continue to be a generalist and then become a manager. And the higher up I got, and that's how I got into a vice president role because I'm not an expert in all things HR, but I've done everything in HR and I can direct people on what to do. And now, like in my current role, I have a team of 6 people that report to me. I'm not doing their role every day, but I know if I had to, I could run payroll. If I had to, I could do benefit selection. But then the higher up you get, you get a team.
I like that. Now, what kind of person would really enjoy something HR? I think, having spoken to recruiters before, it's
Mhm.
I think we have a superficial understanding of the roles.
Yes.
And I know like when I was talking to recruiters, I was like, oh, you just get to talk to people all day and that's all you do. But
Mhm.
there's so much more.
So much more.
So what kind of person would really enjoy like HR as a career?
Yeah, I guess I could just describe myself. No, I think one of the things you cannot be afraid of conflict.
Okay.
So, like I said, I have to fire people. So I am not afraid to speak to anyone. I'm a pretty bold person. Like if I have something to say, I'm going to say it. But I think that comes with the territory. I wasn't always that way. My first couple of jobs, like when I would fire people, I would cry. Now I'm to the point where I can keep it professional. But I think the ability to talk and have difficult conversations with people, whether that's good or bad, giving people feedback, I think you need to be pretty bold because here's the thing, a lot of people don't like HR and
Right.
that's just being honest about it. Like they've either had a bad experience or they have a negative thought process about it. So you're gonna have to win people over. So that's like my strong suit is I'm like super empathetic and I can win over anybody. And it takes time. Like I've definitely had people in my past where they did not want to be they did not want to talk to me. They didn't want like nothing. And I was able to like form a friendship or a bond with them. And then strategic. I think you have to be strategic minded. Like a lot of times, like right now, I'm planning for next year. So I'm
Mhm.
already planning how many people do I need on my team? How are we going to hit these targets? Because if we don't have the right enough people, then
Mhm.
we can't hit our sales targets. We can't hit our budget.
Right.
And so finding the right people and making sure that they stay, because finding them is one thing, making them stay is another thing, is like literally number one on my to-do list in my job.
That is really, really interesting because, and I think we've seen that people leave jobs all the time.
All the
You
time.
know, being in education, there's a lot of us now, they say about 50% leave within five
Mhm.
years, but there's a lot of us that stay and we just stay in the
Yeah.
career for like, I'm in year 16, and you see teachers that are in there for like 16, 20, 25
Yeah.
years. So it's kind of surprising to see that in the corporate kind of space that, people are moving every two to
Oh,
three
yes.
years.
It's unheard of to stay long term. Like, for example, it's funny because my dad worked at the same company for 30 plus years. And he calls me a job hopper because I've moved every 2 to 3 years. And I'm like, that's fine. Like, hop my way all the way to the top.
Right, right.
But it's just funny. It's a completely different mindset. But yeah, the average tenure is 2 to 3 years. And then people are looking for something else. Like they want that new, that want to change. And most people, if they don't get promoted in that time frame, so that's one thing I would say at Refine Labs. We are great about promoting people. So promote from within and then hire somebody for the other role.
I like that. Well, and what was also surprising is that, well, number one, finding out that in education we don't really get raises and cost
Mm,
of living, but and then come to find out, like, within kind of that corporate space, sometimes you have to leave your job every two to
yes.
three years in order to really kind of increase your salary by what you
Mhm.
wanted or needed to do.
Yeah, especially in like the times of recession or major changes, like people leave and get a significant increase. Yeah.
So for people that like to work remote, would
Mhm.
human resources and recruiting would that be a good role for them?
Absolutely. So I can be honest and say I never see myself going back to an office. Like I love to travel. I want to be wherever I want to be and do my job. But this is new. I would say recruiting being remote has been around for years. If you wanted to just be a recruiter, you can do that from anywhere. There's tons of companies. But I think in my role in HR, they used to think you had to be in the office. Like you just had to be there. People needed to see you. And then due to COVID, that all shifted. And so now companies are like, oh no, you can be wherever you want to be. So I think the mindset is changing. But I mean, it wasn't always that way. Definitely was not that way. I say 2 years ago, finding a VP role that was remote was slim.
Yeah, I could see. Well, and it's interesting because my neighbor works for a telecommunications company,
Mhm.
and they're one of those that we never thought would ever go remote.
Mhm.
They went remote, and so they at one point they were talking about bringing people back into the office, which of course made people a little upset. But
Yes,
after they started looking at how much money they were saving by not having
it's
a
a big
physical
deal.
building, they were
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, you guys just stay home. Yeah,
Yeah.
don't."
Like it's not for some companies, like for us, it's just not worth it. Like we don't even have a physical office. You can be wherever you want to be. We have employees that are nomadic, they travel around. As long as you have a computer and your Wi-Fi works, do what you got to do.
Like it. So one question that it always comes up with the students, and for some
Mhm.
reason they think if you make $100,000, that's like the
Yeah.
magic. Then you are like creme de la creme. You're like way up there. So within HR,
Yeah.
is that number feasible to hit six figures?
Absolutely, 100%, and I would say when I started my career, so when I started in, like, the contract recruiter role, my starting salary was 50,000.
Okay.
So in my career, I've never made less than $50,000. I would be honest and say I'm well over, $100,000 now. So very, very happy with my salary, but, without a doubt, you could be very, very successful in HR.
Okay. Beautiful. I love it. And now you mentioned that you had a lot of degrees, but your
Mhm.
intention with those was to go to medical school.
Yep.
So for students that maybe they don't want to go to college and so they'll be
Mhm.
looking for careers that they can get into coming out of high school,
Yeah.
would recruiting or HR be one that they could get into, or would they need to get a degree before applying?
Mhm. I think recruiting 100%. Like if you have someone that is willing to teach you, like for example, I had all those degrees, but they were all going towards medical school. So I had a manager that knew I knew nothing about the business world and she was a mentor to me and taught me everything that I knew. So even if I would not have had those degrees, I learned how to do this job with on the job training.
Right.
I will say a lot of companies nowadays, they want you to hit the ground running, so they're not as patient with that.
Right.
So I don't think you have to have a degree to be a recruiter. I do think in most companies nowadays, you need some type of like HR certification. So they have, prep courses and stuff that you can take to get a certification in HR. So I would highly recommend that. And then I think the higher up you go in HR, they do want you to have some type of degree. And I say that very like some type of degree. Like if you like art, get an art degree. And you just need to have a bachelor's degree. And then you get your foot in the door. But if I'm being honest, if I had it to do over, I would have gotten a bachelor's degree and then maybe went to get my master's once I had a job that was going to pay for it. So be very smart. Student loans are no joke. So wait until most companies, if you work there, 3 to 5 years, they'll pay for you to take classes. Like take advantage of all that. I was too headstrong that I was like, I'm going to do it all on my own. And I wish I would not have.
Yeah. Well, and even I found out a few. I've been teaching for a decade, and I found out that at least where we live, if
Mhm,
a student graduates from like an Oklahoma City high school, then they can go to a junior college or a community college, and it's completely covered.
mhm.
And so there's those opportunities that you're talking about with
Yeah.
education, such as like waiting it out for your employer to pay for some certifications, and
Mhm.
you
I have
know
several friends that did that, and it worked out perfectly. Like, they worked there for 3 years, then they got their master's paid for. Like, that is thousands of dollars that they did not have to spend, or even certifications. Every HR certification that I have, my company paid for me to get it. So, yeah.
well, and some of those certifications are really, really expensive. I was
Oh,
looking.
yeah, like $3,000.
Yeah,
That's not even the prep course, that's just the test.
well, that's what I was looking at the PMP certification. I was like, I don't need that.
Yeah,
No,
it's
no, I don't
very
need that.
expensive. Like, definitely get them to pay for it. Don't pay for it out of your pocket.
So I can tell that you you love your job, and I think a
I
lot of
do.
that has to do with the company that you're with, because
Mhm,
Refine Labs is awesome. And like, if you look on LinkedIn and people that work at Refine Labs, they have great things to say about the company. They're very prolific on their social media. So for your role specifically, what would you say is maybe the thing that you love the most about it, and
mhm.
maybe the most challenging aspect of it?
Yeah, I think those are 2, they might be the same thing. So the one thing that I love the most is that since we're at a startup, early stage company, there is change all the time. We change things on the drop of a dime. In my background, I came from a really large company where that was not the case. Things didn't get changed very quickly. So that has taken some getting used to, but also I love it because if something's not going right, I can change it immediately. Like there's no one telling me you have to go through these number of people.
Mhm.
No, I don't like it, I change it. So that came to play when I wrote the culture playbook. So me and my team got together, collaborated on that. And there are some things that in there that we're going to change in the coming months. We're just going to change it. We don't have to go through a committee or all those things that you would have to do at a big company. So I love the fact that it's a startup and then we can be agile and I can change things as I need to change them. Large companies, you can't do that. But then I say probably the most challenging is that we change things so much. Like literally, we don't like something that's changed, and then like, does everybody know that it's changed? So I think communication is a big thing that we're still working on. Like, we want to get things done so quickly, but sometimes that comes at a cost.
I got you. So it's interesting that you mentioned that, you brought up that you're at a startup right now.
Mhm,
So, and this is what a lot of people, even myself as in my own career and stuff, we don't think about the difference between, do I
mhm.
want to work corporate? Do I want to work startup? Do I want to work nonprofit?
Yeah.
So, and you kind of mentioned that change aspect of being in the startup where you can just kind of go and just change things
Mhm,
if you need to change. So let's talk for a second about kind of the pros and cons of working at a
mhm.
startup versus working at a very large established company.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, so just for context, the company I worked for was GM Financial, thousands of employees. So their HR department, at just the HR department, was 200 people. Then I came to a startup where the HR department was me and one other person. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So literally like just completely different mindset. So one, I always laugh and say if I want like when I want to retire, I'll go back to a big company because you don't really got to work that hard. Like,
Okay.
there's so many people in the department that your section is one little section. So it's your training or you're doing recruiting or you're doing employee relations. Whereas my job right now is all encompassing anything that has to do with human resources or people, it all flows to me. So that's a lot of responsibility, one. But two, that comes with you can change things. So to my earlier point, if you don't like it, you can make it what you want it to be.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think of creativity when they think of HR, but I think it is such a creative space. So for example, I wrote a culture book because I thought I want people to really understand what it's like to be here. And I just wrote it out and sent it. And now everybody gets it when they onboard. So those are the type of things that like you can be really innovative in the people space when you're in a smaller company. In a bigger company, there's just more red tape, there's more people involved, there's more processes and procedures. And some people work better in that space. So some people want, they want X, Y, and Z. This is what I have to do. But in a startup, there's a lot of gray area. You're figuring it out as you go. And I thrive in that type of environment, but I know a lot of people that don't, that they want to know exactly by the T what to do every day, how to do it. And that's just not a startup.
So would it be easier? Maybe this is a kind of, it depends on the company, but
Yeah.
would it be easier to, because here's what I think of, Amazon, everybody wants to
Yeah.
work for like Amazon, Google,
Mhm. Facebook. Yeah.
is it easier to get into the larger corporate, or is it easier to get hired onto a startup, assuming you're qualified for the role?
Yeah, I say if you're qualified, to me, it's been easier to get into a startup
Okay.
because like kind of skill set, they need you on the ground. A lot of times in a startup, you're one of a few people, whereas in a larger company, you're one of hundreds of
Yeah.
people that are doing the same job. So it's a catch 22 because part of me, if I look back at my career, I learned a lot from being at a big company
Mhm.
that I might not necessarily that helped me then go to a startup because
Gotcha.
I saw the way that they ran it and maybe I wanted to keep it the same or maybe I wanted to change it. But at a startup, you got to know what you're doing, like because it's just you. There's no one there really to train you or mentor you. So my path was going from a large company and then getting into startups once
Okay.
I've been like 10 years into, being in HR. So it did help me. I think it would be harder to be new and go to a startup.
That's it's interesting. It's
Yeah.
almost kind of it's like easier to get to the startup, but
Yeah.
harder to thrive in the startup if
Yes.
you don't know what you're doing. Versus it's harder to get up into the corporate, but
Mhm.
you get it's easier to get settled in because
Yes.
I would imagine the onboarding and the training is a lot
Very
more.
extensive.
Yeah,
Yes. Mhm.
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's a catch-22 because I'm like, if I had it to do over, I'd probably still go big company and then go to startup."
Okay, I like it. So I love that you mentioned a mentor earlier as you were getting into this. And so, one of the things I really like to talk about on this series is mentors. And so, for you, how important do you feel mentors are? And what is your definition of mentorship?
Yeah, I recommend that everybody have a mentor. I've had the same mentor throughout my career. She and I have known each other for 10 years. We're not always connected or not always talking. It's sometimes like we'll go months without talking until I need her advice on something or, that type of situation. But a mentor to me is somebody who has gone before you. So they have been in your role or they have a lot of experience in like working with somebody in your role. And then two, they can give you guidance on like the decisions that you're making or kind of give you some difficult feedback. So my mentor has given me some very difficult feedback. We've been working on my communication skills because I'm very passionate and sometimes that can
I
come
gotcha.
off, a little abrasive. But she has given me that feedback before. And she is a chief people officer, which is the role that I want. So I want to be in the C suite. And so she has guided me through when I've made career decisions that I was going to leave or I'm looking at this type of role. She's the best person to like look at job descriptions with me. Even for this role that I'm in right now, it was strategically be a VP, become an SVP, and then you can become a chief people officer. So I'm very mission driven on a road to where I want to be. And she has helped me get there because she's already there.
Got you. I like it's funny. Everybody has kind of a different story
Mhm.
where there are some that are completely driven, like
Yeah.
exactly where you want to be, exactly how you want to get there, and
Yeah.
you are zipping through. And then some I talk to, they are kind of just
Yeah. Like, well, it's okay. They
oh
call them squiggly careers, which I think is
yes,
so cool, but that's not me.
no, I like that, and it's as you mentioned the communication because I think that's dealing with my own students who don't really understand the impact of they just kind of stuff just comes out of their mouth, and so I tell them all the time I'm like you guys have to be mindful of how you communicate with
Yeah.
others because especially when you get we talk about the real world, but I
Mhm.
said especially when you get into the real world I said that can cost you friendships. It can cost you a
Oh, yeah.
job if you come off the wrong way.
Absolutely. But I do think that there's something to be said as like just speaking to women that like, "Oh, well, you're supposed to be meek and quiet," and no, no, I don't
Yes.
subscribe to that at all. And part of me thinks that I've gotten where I am because I am very bold, but that boldness comes with me just giving you my ideas, like giving you my honest feedback. And so any interactions that I have, even with my past CEOs or my current CEO, they know that I'm gonna be honest with them, whether they like what I'm saying or not. I'm gonna be honest, but in a respectful way. And I think it takes courage to do that. So, yeah.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. And as we kind of talked, the amount of women that are in the C-suite or
Mhm.
getting close to there is so very, very few.
Yes.
And I was talking to just a wonderful woman the other day, and she's like, it's 6% of all women are in
Yeah.
the C-suite. So I think it's so like I think number one, it's awesome, and I also
Mm.
think it's very important for you and other women to get up in those C suites because then, as like my own daughters that I
Oh,
have,
yeah.
and my students, as they see the faces of women in
Yes.
there, it encourages them to
That you
push
could do it
forward.
too.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And even at Refine Labs, our senior leadership team is 80% women. That is unheard of.
yeah.
80%. And even in this, based on the statistic you just said, women of color in the C suite is 1%. So once I get to the C suite, there will be 1% of people that are in my same spot. That blows my mind.
That does blow my mind. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Heidi the other day, and it was kind of funny. And I was, and she goes, Josh, she goes, women do way better in sales. And so, and I was
Mhm.
like, and I was like, I hadn't even actually really thought of that. I
Yeah.
just thought that you tend to see more men in there. So it like, the other men tend to gravitate
Yeah.
towards what they're, the commonality of it. And I go, well, Heidi, why is that? Because I was
Mhm.
really completely
Yeah.
curious about it. And she goes, well, because women tend to listen to understand,
Yeah.
and men tend to listen to just respond.
To
And
explain. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, what a great, because as a leader,
Yeah.
whether it's sales, understanding the pain points, whether you're
Mhm.
in HR, whether you're, recruiting, whether, especially at that leadership position, you have to be empathetic.
Yes. It's such a big thing, and I think active listening, like listening to truly understand, not to underpin what they're saying, but to truly just listen. One of my things I started doing years ago, and this actually came from my mentor, is I am such like go, 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 go. I'm a master of list. I have a list everywhere, sticky notes everywhere. But when someone is talking to me, to take my hands off the keyboard and to literally put my hands in my lap. So that way I'm not writing, I'm not typing, I'm just listening to you. I'm giving you my undivided attention. And it is something I actively have to work on, but it changed the game for me because I would get feedback from people that like, she's not listening, even though I could tell you what you said, but
Right.
I'm like actively doing other stuff too. And that's not really respectful. So that's feedback that I've gotten to. Yeah. So I just take my hands off and put them in my lap, and then I have to listen to you.
I love that, because I know that is, every once in a while I get that same
Mhm.
feedback where I'm listening. I
Yeah.
can repeat back to you what you told me,
Yep.
but I'm either typing or I'm writing.
Mhm.
So it's the appearance. And so
Yes.
it
It's the
looks like,
perception.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so, that I think that's a great reminder for, for myself and for everybody else,
Yeah.
because nobody wants to feel like they're being dismissed,
Oh yeah.
So I think
Absolutely.
that's, yeah.
I would definitely get that feedback where people be like, "Oh, she wasn't even paying attention." And like I said, I can tell you everything that you said, but to them, I wasn't paying attention. And so that's feedback that I got that I have definitely worked on. I think with my team now, it's funny because I'm like intently listening, like I've gone like the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So it's all good though.
Well, see, and now I feel bad, because I was talking to my mentor Jesse, who's over my internship. I was making copies while I was talking to her, and then I'm
Mm.
like, I don't know if I was really intently. I can tell you what we talked about, but yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up, because that is
Yeah.
something that I will start holding myself more accountable
Yeah.
to do.
It's a
So
good reminder.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. So I have a last question, but it's a hot seat question for you.
I like it. Okay.
Okay. And your answer doesn't have to be related to career. It doesn't have to be related to education. It can be anything you want. But
Okay.
knowing what you know now,
Mhm.
what is one piece of advice that you would give to your like middle school and high school self?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, this might sound silly, but I would tell myself to relax.
Okay.
I am very, very type A. I'm like the epitome of an overachiever. If you give me something, it's done. I don't want it to just be done. I have to be number one. And so that came up, in high school. I wanted to be valedictorian and like all this stuff. And I would like stress myself out over studying. And I look back and I'm like, what did I get out of it? Like why did I allow that to like overcome me? And in grades and obviously getting into college, if that's what you want to do is important, but don't let it consume you. So if I could go back, I would tell myself to relax. Like you're gonna figure it out. You're on the right track, but you don't have to be number one at everything. Now I'm still learning this lesson. Okay. I still want to be number one at everything. So it's still a battle even in my 30s. But overall, I would say relax. You got it. You'll figure it out.
I love it. I love it. Love it so much. All right. Well, Jessica, I just can't thank you enough for just like these knowledge bombs that you dropped. And
Yeah, this is fun.
yeah, and I think your story is absolutely important. I think it's going to be very inspiring to my students, and also there are, as I've been showing these on LinkedIn, especially
Mhm.
'cause it's been very convenient because it's International Women's Month.
Exactly.
So this has been like, I have all these interviews that I'm able to, and hey, on this day I'd like to like give a shout out to,
Mhm.
and so yeah, and so there's so many career changers out there
Yes.
also, that a lot of these videos are providing really valuable feedback to them also. So
Yeah.
it's been
Yeah.
fantastic. thing.
Absolutely. And I think people that are changing careers, like I commend that. I think it's so important to go. You don't have to do the same thing forever. My mom, funny story, she was an executive assistant for like 20 years.
Okay.
Decided when I went back to college, she was going to go back to college too. And now she's, a therapist, social worker, and like does all this amazing stuff for the community. So she changed careers, mid 30s and went to school when I went to school. So it's pretty funny.
I thought you were going to say she ended up going to medical school because you didn't.
No. No, so I think sometimes you think that I'm gonna change my mind and go to medical school, but I'm not.
Well, you look like you're happy where you're at, and I think
I am.
all right, Jessica. We'll chat soon.
Thank you.
Bye.